My fellow Americans, tonight I'd like to talk with you about immigration.
Does the public know that the Emancipation Proclamation was an executive order?
Call for stupidity of the American voter or whatever.
Stop whining, and they should start legislating.
All of us take offense to anyone who reaps the rewards of living in America without taking on the responsibilities of living in America.
And it's going to be a very dangerous situation. You're going to see, hopefully not, but you can see instances of anarchy. You can see violence.
Overall, the number of people trying to cross our border illegally is at its lowest level since the 1970s. Those are the facts.
You can see violence.
Those are the facts. And independent experts said that it would help grow our economy and shrink our deficits.
The stupidity of the American voter.
The Emancipation Proclamation.
Those are the facts.
My fellow Americans, those are the facts.
Anarchy, emancipation, and facts. Oh my. Welcome to The Resistance. This is your host, Forrest Wilson. If you call in, I'm going to give you something. It's a book entitled Dynamic Freedom, something that we really need right now. Because apparently about 1/3 of us are the only ones that can identify the three branches of government. Now, I know those listening are much smarter than those not listening, but you can share this book with the 2/3 that can identify the three branches of the federal government. It's hard to have representative government when you can't identify the government. How can you give consent to something that you can't identify? Executive amnesty through executive orders is really a circumvention of the separation of powers. And you'll learn about that in this Dynamic Freedoms document. All you got to do is call in. Leave your address with Jack. Jack, do you have a pen and paper today? Can you take an address down? Are you capable? You don't even have your headphones on. You know what he does?
I sit here and sleep.
He sits there and listens to the show.
At the edge of my chair, like most listeners, okay? Wondering what's going to happen.
Oh, nothing's going to happen. We're going to try to get people. We're going to stir the pot. We're going to try to get people all riled up. So the president and the progressives and Congress, the Democrats and others pushing for executive action are not. Look, they're not only waving their collective middle fingers at the rest of Congress and the American people, citizens, legal immigrants, indigenous people. They're sticking their collective finger in the eye of everyone. This is not the executive's discretion. This is really a violation of the Constitution and a failure to faithfully execute our immigration laws, which include deportation, by the way, although there's not much of that going on right now. And, I was looking at the Constitution today, and one of the things that strikes me is that when they separate the powers and they describe the three branches of government, the very first article, some of the first words that you read when you open the Constitution or you see it on parchment, Article 1, Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. It's right up front. And there's a reason why these are the very first words of the Constitution. And really the very first article and section have to do with the Congress. And that's because we have representative government. We have a constitutional republic, not a democracy. And representative government begins with you and me. And the government, and I know it doesn't seem like it, but it derives their power from the consent of the governed. Oh, but I don't want to have anything to do with politics. I'm too busy. I'm too stupid. Thanks to Gruber. It's too complicated. They don't listen to me. You can hear a number of excuses coming from your colleagues, your friends, your family. And that's exactly what some of these people, our employees, want you to think. And encourages these cowardly acts we see happening right now. Your inaction, your ignoring elections, you're walking away and not standing up to our employees, that is consent to them. And we're supposed to be governed by consent. That's why I encourage you to make an appointment with your congressman, take your family and friends, go in there and let them have it. Let them hear from you. Article 1, Section 8, the Congress shall have power to establish uniform rule of naturalization. In other words, They set forth the rules by which people immigrate here. And by the way, we've got very comprehensive immigration laws. The problem is our dear leader refuses to enforce them now, as his Thursday night speech disclosed to us. So how many of you listened to the president's speech? I mean, as hard as it is, I encourage you to listen. And as difficult as it may be to hear this man drone on about something which he has no intention of faithfully executing. Anyhow, I pulled out the main piece of it because I listened to all 15 minutes over and over and over again. But Jack, pull up clip 3. I want you to listen to the main piece, the deal.
So we're going to offer the following deal. If you've been in America for more than 5 years, if you have children who are American citizens or legal residents, if you register, pass a criminal background check, and you're willing to pay your fair share of taxes, you'll be able to apply to stay in this country temporarily without fear of deportation. You can come out of the shadows and get right with the law. That's what this deal is. Now let's be clear about what it isn't. This deal does not apply to anyone who has come to this country recently. It does not apply to anyone who might come to America illegally in the future. It does not grant citizenship or the right to stay here permanently or offer the same benefits that citizens receive. Only Congress can do that. All we're saying is we're not going to deport you.
What he's saying is I'm not going to enforce the immigration law of the land. And how many broadcasts do you think there were south of the border where somebody's standing there interpreting what the president's saying as he's speaking? He's really not even speaking to us in many respects. He's speaking to those south of the border. You know, how many of those do you think really understood and heard about the 5-year thing? In other words, let's get up there now. Let's catch a train through Mexico and head to the United States. How many really heard that you had to be here 5 years? And how many are willing to come here and wait 5 years now, hoping for some sort of amnesty and some ability to stay in this country? Look, 52% of the Mexican population live in poverty. I believe the figure was less than $2 a day. I can understand them getting up and walking up here, but they ought to be stopped at the border, have to get in line, fill out paperwork, and wait. They shouldn't come here and wait. And I think it's really turning a lot of immigrants who immigrated here legally against the president and his party. I also think that a lot of black voters are really becoming incensed. And if you want to weigh in, I'd like to hear from you. 222-TALK, 904-222-TALK, 904-222-8255. I mean, does this immigration mess just make you angry? Does the president's speech make you angry? Do you feel like violence or anarchy? I don't think many people do, but who knows? You know, we've got people, they're supposed to announce this thing in Ferguson here and sometime today, I guess, whether or not they're going to indict the police officer Wilson for shooting this Michael Brown when he was being attacked. That's anarchy. Are we going to have more of that as a result of, I don't know. I don't think so. I think Americans are a lot more reasonable. I think they're more sensible. I don't think we have to worry about what Tom Coburn said. But it does make you think, you know, why should I, for example, obey the tax law? I mean, that's something that really incensed me. Why should I have to pay taxes when you've got people coming here that are paying no taxes? And now they're getting a break. Well, where's my break? You know, you listen to what the president said and you think about it. He's not obeying the law. And I guess that was the point of Tom Coburn's comments when Senator Coburn said that, well, there could be violence and anarchy. I just don't see it. I think the American people are a lot more sensible. I also think they're a lot smarter. Let me just take a quick call before we take a break here. Welcome to the show. This is Forrest Wilson. Go ahead. Hello.
Hey, this is Mo. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Who's this?
This is Mo.
Hey, Mo. How are you?
Good.
Are you angry about this?
I think there's so many aspects, negative aspects to this. There's, potential terrorists coming over the border. There's drug cartels. They've talked about the gangs coming over. A lot of diseases, respiratory diseases. It's not just the economics. There is so many things that are not being talked about, and all these unintended consequences are going to come to roost, and people don't realize that.
And Mo, to your point, I was digging around and looking for some statistics on the internet, and I found something really interesting. There's a lot of different numbers, and they vary, but anywhere from 12 to 25 citizens of this great nation are killed every day at the hand of an illegal, not necessarily murder. It could be an accident. It could be a drunk driver, or in some of the statistics that I read, about 12 murders a day, per day. So, 4,800 to 9,000 American citizens every year are killed at the hands of an illegal. Now, that's a whole lot more than have been killed in a terrorist act. I think it was 3,000 on 9/11. And you've got close to 9,000 a year dying at the hand of an illegal. And you're right. You don't hear anything about that. I was astounded.
Well, it's so difficult to do background checks on these people because they don't have the record-keeping system like we have in the United States. So you don't know if you're letting in an axe murderer or, somebody that's going to pick fruit. You don't know who that person is. And people are trying to focus on a couple of things like, okay, it's illegal and all, but they're not thinking about everything, the overcrowding of the schools, all the social services, the crime increase, the disease, the drug cartels, and a lot of these gang members, they come over one and two at a time, and then they reform once they're in the United States and become strong, and they just start terrorizing people. And
well,
we have to have the rule of law.
I was astounded at the number of people that die at the hands of an illegal every day. Mo, thanks for the call. Good points. You're listening to The Resistance. We'll be right back with more on this immigration mess.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
So we've got some sheriffs that are planning to march on Washington, D.C. December 10th, and they're planning a rally in Washington, D.C., and it's being organized by two sheriffs from, of all places, Massachusetts, Bristol County Sheriff Thomas Hodgson and Plymouth County Sheriff Joseph McDonald. According to an article in WorldNet Daily, they're trying to organize as many as possible, the goal being about 200. And they want to pay a visit to the Capitol and to make a stand against amnesty and plead for Congress and the president to secure the border. Boy, I tell you, the number of illegals involved in the deaths of citizens ought to be enough to secure the border. Forget about the terrorists that may be coming over. We've got somewhere between 3,000 and 9,000 citizens a year that die at the hands of an illegal. And look, you know what? I've got compassion for these people. I really do. I think most Americans do. And we don't want to rip their families apart, but take the whole family and send them home. We'd almost be better off sending them home and, paying for their health care across the border, sending money across the border. I think it would be cheaper than what we've got right now. We have got complete chaos. And I just don't see anything happening in Capitol Hill that's positive in any way, shape, or form. Right after the president's speech, Mitch McConnell and John Boehner went home for the holidays. This is not a time to be going home for the holidays. These are very serious times that we're in. And you've got Tom Coburn. I don't know how many of you have heard this. He's talking about anarchy and violence, insurrection as a result of this executive action. But apparently more than 20 of these sheriffs have already signed up to participate, and the march will culminate in a meeting with Republican leaders at the Capitol building regarding possible legislation to secure the border once and for all. They did have legislation to secure the border. I think George Bush signed it into law. I don't know that it'll do any good, but they probably ought to include some Democrats in that meeting. But what's interesting about the article is it also references the number of people killed every day by an illegal alien. And I thought terrorism was a good reason to close the border, and I've been beating that drum for some time. But apparently, really restricting the flow of illegals into this country is not a bad idea. And we do have to do something about the people that are already here. But I would recommend that that's done after we secure the border. And some of them need to be deported. I want you to take a listen to this presidential speech. It's about 15 minutes. You'll have to Google it. It is worthwhile to hear it. It's full of mush. And I want you to listen again to his deal. But before I play that for you again, I want to bring in host, writer, and political strategist Josh Bernstein. Josh is also the new spokesperson for the Association of American Citizens, AMAC. Josh, welcome to The Resistance. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fantastic.
All right. Well, I got a chance to hear a little bit what you were talking about there. And look, there's no doubt that with this executive amnesty, it basically told the new coming Republican House and Senate members that I'm not going to work with you. And then ultimately it told the 120 million voters that repudiated Barack Obama's policies, I don't care what you say. And then he has the audacity after his thumping that night to say to the 2/3 of people out there, I heard you too. And to me, that it shows so much arrogance to say that because they didn't have a voice. They didn't exercise their voice and go out to even vote. So for him to say that he hears the 2/3, it's just ridiculous.
Well, Josh, what can the American public, and for that matter, the Congress do? I mean, is impeachment off the table? I keep hearing that, we don't want to talk about impeachment. Is impeachment off the table?
Well, impeachment should never be off the table, and I've done the math. My upbringing, my non-Common Core upbringing, mathematics, would show me that with the simple vote for an articles of impeachment in the House, then that would go to the Senate. The Senate would need 2/3 majority in order to convict him and do the trial and everything else. Well, after you look at all of the incoming Republican senators that are coming in that took seats away from the Democrats, and you look at what's been left over, the rest of them are hardcore radical leftists. I mean, you've got the Barbara Boxers and the Feinsteins and the Reeds and the Durbins, and all those folks are still left there. So I started to kind of piece through some of the other folks there. I count at the most maybe 9, maybe 10 votes that you could get the Democrats to go along with, as long as every Republican went along with it. So in essence, I believe that if we did that, we would fall between 3 to 7 votes short, unfortunately. And the other part of this, which I think is the people aren't understanding, is that he's goading the Republicans purposely because he wants them to enact impeachment proceedings, knowing that it's probably going to fail. Then he's got 2 years, and the Democrats have 2 years to run on the fact that, look, Republicans are anti-Hispanic. Republicans don't want to have, you have citizenship and this and that. And they'll be beating down on the Republican Party for 2 years in preparations for 2016. So you have to look at the entire picture and the whole strategy.
Well, I agree with your calculus. I do. I agree with the math. But
what we do is we defund it, and we have to do that. Now, we already know that Boehner, left town, went home for Thanksgiving without putting together a short-term funding bill. That was the ultimate thing that we needed to get done. That hasn't been done yet. So when they come back in December, are they going to do that? Are they going to fund the government short-term up until maybe a few days after the new Republican senators and new Congress people come in? And then from that point, that new Senate and Congress can work on a new bill, an omnibus bill, without funding the executive amnesty.
Well, okay, so you don't fund the executive amnesty, so you don't hand out the permits and you don't register these people and you don't collect their taxes.
Correct.
But your math is correct. But is there another dynamic at play here? I mean, is it possible? Is it possible that the American people are so pissed off that they pressure those Democrat senators into a possible impeachment scenario? I'm just wondering because...
Well, I always say this, a majority in America and a minority in Congress can create a majority in Congress, and that will come from the grassroots. The only way that I see this happening is if the sheriffs come into town 200 strong, and as a matter of fact, I talked about this on one of my last shows, and I said that, and I told them point blank, December 10th is too long to wait. If you're going to do it, you might as well do it right now because this is coming. But that's another story for another day. If there's a groundswell of support out there for impeachment, in other words, if the people, we the people, rise up to a level that puts all the pressure, and we have, millions of people inside Washington, screaming in the streets for his impeachment, then yes, I believe that we could get the majority of those Democrats to move on over to the impeachment side. But are we going to do that? That's going to be the question. I hope so.
I want to throw out your website. It's Josh Bernstein, politicalwriter.com. I'm going to spell Bernstein, Bernstein, Josh Bernstein, politicalwriter.com. Josh, it's so great to have you on the show. So that scenario could play out. Politics is so unpredictable, especially in today's age.
Right.
And I'm in hopes that, look, they tried Clinton, remember? And he was impeached in the House of Representatives, and it failed in the Senate.
Right.
But it was symbolic, and I think it could do something potentially for this the Republican Party. Not that I give a damn about the Republican Party.
No president has ever been impeached and removed from office. Clinton and I believe Johnson have been impeached but not convicted or removed from office. So Barack Obama would have the choice to be the third one not removed, or possibly, hopefully, the first to have been convicted and removed. And obviously that would be the best case scenario for America and future generations alike.
Josh, I got to take a quick break. I hope you can stay through the break.
I'd love to stay with you.
I want to talk to you some more about the economics of all this. AM 600, FM 100.3, The Answer. You're listening to The Resistance. Forrest Wilson. We've got Josh Bernstein. I want you to stay tuned. He's got some interesting things to share with us on the economics of this whole mess this president has created. We'll be right back.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
Okay, I'm back with radio talk show host, writer, and political strategist Josh Bernstein. Josh, there's an article out there, Amnesty and the Minimum Wage Makes Strange Bedfellows, and the very same economic argument Obama uses to push a minimum wage increase works against his amnesty proposal. How is that?
Well, okay, you got to back up a little bit from that. You have to understand that with amnesty, you are going to allow a lot of folks that are going to be low-wage, low-skilled workers into the country. You're going to find a lot of folks that are not educated. There are going to be a lot of folks that are going to be doing manual labor type of jobs. Now, a lot of those folks are also going to swell the welfare rolls, swell the disability rolls, swell the unemployment rolls, and it's all done on purpose because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for more dependence so that they can have a bigger voter coalition. So what this is truly all about is not bringing people out of the shadows. It's really truly about making more Democratic voters because I believe it's about a 70-30 split. In other words, 70% of these folks are going to be new Democratic voters. If you're lucky, maybe 30% will be Republican voters. That is how the left has used the election, if you will, to say, I don't care what the Republicans did. I don't care that they wiped the floor with us. We still have the fundamental transformation of America as our goal, and this is how we're going to achieve it through executive amnesty. That's the one thing. The second thing is, when people talk about the minimum wage, what they're basically saying is every time you raise the minimum wage, you create less jobs, not more jobs, because you have free will. At least you should still have free will in this country. And when businesses are forced to pay X amount of dollars when they don't think that the productivity equals, the cost, then they have the choice to shut down that business or relocate that business. So now that minimum wage or that exponential increase in money is now zero because the business either closed or left. And so for me, when you raise the minimum wage, you actually do the opposite of what you think you're supposed to do. You create less jobs, not more jobs. It's actually mathematically very simple.
Well, and these geniuses have assumed that these people want to come out of the shadows. I mean, if they're making a livable wage in their view, and they're not paying taxes or living and abiding under all these oppressive regulations, why would they come out of the shadows? And why would an employer encourage them to come out of the shadows?
Exactly. And when you have only 4% of wage earners that actually earn minimum wage, half of them are under the age of 24 years old, and take that into consideration when you have the unemployment rate for younger kids, college kids, teenagers, what have you, close to 35-40%. They call it Generation X, then they call it Generation Y, and then they call it Generation Z. I'd call this Generation L, as in lost, because unfortunately they're losing out. They're losing out on having a future generation, a future society that is going to be better than the ones that their parents had. And your main goal as one generation is to leave the next generation in a better position, not a worse position. And this is unfortunate that this has occurred.
Well, what do you think about the replacement of the black voter with the Hispanic voter?
It's funny that you mentioned that. I wrote a very controversial article, and the name of the article was Hispanic is the New Black. Now, you've heard of the show Orange is the New Black, right? So I was kind of being a little, playful there, and I used Hispanic as the new black. You have to understand, the Democratic Party is smart. They can see the electorate. They can see what's happening, the demographics in this country. They understand that the voting bloc that is increasing for them is the Hispanic vote. And they've always had the African American or the black vote. As a matter of fact, they've had it overwhelmingly for the past 60, 65 years. So now the blacks are saying, well, wait a minute, what about us? And the Democrat Party, or at least the leaders of the Democrat Party, are saying, we don't need you anymore. We've got all these new voters that are coming in, so we don't need you anymore. So to African Americans that have been on, the government's Democratic plantation for so long, they need to come over to the Republican side and have a new alliance with us. We can help them with their families. We can help them with their finances. We can help them grow, be more prosper, increase the, decrease the levels of violence in their neighborhoods, have more opportunity, get away from the hand of government and actually get a hand up rather than a hand out. And if we can get, I did the math, between 15 to 18% of the African American vote, we actually can compete moving forward in elections.
I'm not sure why blacks support the Democrat Party to begin with, but I think a lot of
I know. I mean, when you think about it, you have, the anti-slavery platform is what the Republican Party was founded on. You have the Jim Crow laws of the South. Those were done by Southern Democrats. The 3/5 of a person decision was, again, from Democrats. The Democrats were against the abolition of slavery. So you're right. It amazes me as well. And I think that what they've been able to do is use the language, the romanticism of the left's language to fool people for so long. See, to an untrained ear, someone says, I'm going to give you this. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to give you health care. I'm going to give you free education. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That sounds really good. But to the other guy that says, I'm going to remove all of the obstacles and barriers that are put in place by our government so that you can go out by yourself and create the wealth and the type of life that you deserve. Now, to the untrained ear, they go, huh? I want the guy that's going to hand me everything. That's how the left wins. It's not by their policies and their ideas. It's by their language.
I think people are waking up to bureaucratic despotism. Josh Bernstein.
From your lips to God's ears.
I sure do appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for coming on the show. It's Josh Bernstein, politicalwriter.com. That's BERNSTEIN. Josh, thanks again. Sure do appreciate your time.
No problem. I'd love to be back.
We'll have you back.
Okay. God bless.
Well, and to Josh's point, black activists speak out against Obama amnesty agenda. I think a lot of people are waking up, whether they're black or Hispanic or white, whatever group you might find yourself in. I just see an awakening going on in this country, and I hope that awakening can continue and we can stop and thwart the bureaucratic despotism that's being inflicted upon us by the progressives in the Congress, the Senate, and the executive branch. I want to bring in a politician, somebody who I have great respect for, somebody who is going to be running for the open seat vacated by John Thrasher, who's now the president-elect of Florida State University. His name is Ronald Doc Joseph Renwart Sr. Doc, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Forrest.
Well, I'm so glad to hear from you today. Now, you're out walking and hopefully encouraging people to get involved and vote for you in this upcoming special election. When is that election, by the way? You've got a primary first and then the actual election. When's the primary?
Yeah, the primary is January 27th. It's a Tuesday, and they'll have early voting just like a typical election, and they'll even have absentee ballots.
And this Senate seat represents Flagler, Putnam, St. John's, and part of Volusia County.
That's correct.
And your challenger is Travis Hudson. Now, one thing that differentiates the two of you, and I think is very important, you are actually a medical doctor, an osteopathic medicine specialist.
Actually, my specialty is internal medicine. I did my training at University of Florida in Jacksonville.
And you're also a former soldier.
Sure. I did 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan, and retired after 20 years of service as a full colonel with the Florida Army National Guard.
Well, thank you for your service. And Doc, we've been talking about illegal immigration, and I want you to talk about the impact of this amnesty or proposed amnesty by the president on the citizens of Florida.
Well, it certainly is going to affect all states, some states differently than others. And, we've had, students being bused into our state that are young aliens that have come across the border to the state of Florida. And that puts extra pressure on our infrastructure, particularly schools and other things that we are required to provide. And we tried to pass a bill, I think it was in 2011, 2012. It was a card check program where we checked the identifications and the backgrounds of workers that do construction and other types of labor. It passed through some big committees in the House where I supported it. Unfortunately, it died in the state Senate, and there was a big push by builders and construction workers to stop that bill. So in some ways, it may help some of these companies get cheap labor, but it really helps our community, hurts our communities, and it really hurts our workforce in the state, and will further worsen the unemployment rate, which are finally getting to bring down with the new business and industries that we've been attracting.
Well, the infrastructure items that you mentioned that this illegal immigration impacts, it's property taxes.
Yeah, well, somebody's got to pay for all these bills. I mean, the schools don't open by themselves. And immigration policies are supposed to be cooperation of the legislative branch and the executive branch, really at the federal level. And, what we've seen is something that's well out of the bounds of what the Constitution states as presidential authority. He is not to make laws. He is to execute laws. He is to take those policies and make them happen. But he has not followed through with the current policies on immigration. Now, really what we need to have is a very deep and very tall fence that protects our borders, but yet we also have to have a very wide gate. And that gate is really the policy of how you become a citizen or how you get to work in the United States. And we have to have a policy that we stick with and be consistent with it.
And to your point, immigration on our terms, not their terms.
Yeah, I mean, the job of the executive branch, and that's the president, he's the head executor, is to follow those policies. That is where our president has been failing us.
You mentioned that some of these children that have come across the border. Now, when we think of children, 8 to 13 years old, but really somebody from Mexico, or some of these other South American countries that are 8 to 13-year-olds are far more mature than what we would consider an 8 to 13-year-old. But how many of these are actually coming into the state of Florida?
Well, that's really hasn't been clear, but we know there have been some buses that have actually shown up in South Florida virtually unannounced. And in some ways, these may be anchor children. You know, if further policies develop, it wouldn't be hard for a stroke of the pen to allow the families of these children who have found their way into our country to have an open door to settle in whatever state where these children end up. And that could, again, put a burden on our state. And again, our taxes are going to have to pay for that.
Well, Doc, I wonder if you can stay through the break. I got to take a quick break. Sure. And I want to get into, your policies, what you believe in, why you're running for this open seat. We're talking to Ronald Doc Renwart, representative, Florida State House of Representatives, 2008 to the present. He's got some interesting positions. I want you to stay tuned. Great man, soldier, doctor, running for the open seat left by John Thrasher. You're listening to AM 600 FM 100.3, The Resistance. Forrest Wilson. We'll be right back.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
And we're talking with Ronald Doc Renwart, soldier, doctor, politician. And you've got some really interesting views, very conservative.
Sure.
What do you think are the main issues facing the state?
I have to laugh. Your last commercial was Dr. Roy Himman with Island Doctors. He and I actually served together in Iraq back in 2003, so I just thought it was ironic his commercial came up.
He's a great patriot and supporter of the show.
Oh, very good. Well, I'm a conservative, and I've been supporting smaller government, fewer taxes, and more individual freedoms since I first ran for office in 2008. And really, that's just what I've done. And in the 4 terms that I've been elected to the Florida House, the state has seen a $6.4 billion reduction in revenues that have come in during that time. And we had to solve our budget and balance our budget by making some bold decisions. And this was by reducing spending, not putting that burden on taxpayers here in the state. And Florida is certainly in a better position for doing that. States like New York, New Jersey, California, they wish they were in Florida's position right now. And I'm still for attracting more business and industry to bring down the unemployment rate, particularly to these areas that the Senate district serves. St. Johns County is doing very well with a low unemployment rate, but they don't have a lot of business and industry. Most of them, those who are working out of the county. Other areas such as Putnam and Flagler are having significant problems with employment rates, even as the rest of the state's improving. Flagler's still like around 8%, and Putnam's about 7.5%. So jobs and industry is still very vital to these areas that I represent.
Well, Doc, having been in business for a very long time and managed large staffs of employees and dealt with the federal government and the state government, it's daunting to have employees. I mean, it is let's just put it this way. It's the equivalent of bureaucratic despotism to try to employ someone anymore.
Yeah, it is certainly a challenge, but what the state is trying to do is reduce some of those burdens that we put on business and industry to encourage them to hire more employees, to expand their business, and allow the businesses to flourish. Because as businesses flourish, we hire more folks, we provide more services. In turn, that actually produces more revenue for the state, rather than the state being the heavy hand and putting pressure on them.
Well, it really sounds hopeful, but there's one thing that I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about, especially being a medical doctor, and that's the Affordable Care Act.
I give lectures on this, but I'm one of those ones who have really stood up against this. Health care is not a package that you can just hand somebody. Access to health care is not health care, and the Affordable Care Act is really going the wrong direction. It's putting more government between the patient and the doctor, and I've been one to try and improve that doctor-patient relationship. And I've got some plans in place to kind of be alternatives to expanding the Medicaid, which is one of the issues that we're facing at the state level. And where each individual on an expanded Medicaid would cost the state around $6,000 per person, half of those who'd be eligible could purchase plans in the Affordable Care Act $20 to $30 per month. But yet when it costs the taxpayer, we're talking $6,000 per year. But we have a lot of options as far as helping those who are in the gap. In other words, they can't qualify for our current Medicaid, yet they can't afford even the Affordable Care Act, or they don't qualify for the Affordable Care Act. And the Florida House of Representatives had a bill 2 years ago that I was one of the authors of and one of the designers of, that was to try and help cover that gap. And that passed through the Florida House, but it did not get support in the Florida Senate.
Well, I understand with all these subsidies, these insurance companies now are actually, at least from what I'm reading, they are more in support of the Affordable Care Act and the prospects that it brings all of these new insured to them. And, of course, it does great harm to the country, in my belief, because I just don't think you can tax your way to a solution in health care.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. And when you start adding more bureaucracy, it doesn't lower the cost, and it doesn't improve the efficiency. And you have to have somebody who's motivated to take care of their own health, and there's got to be some kind of a reason why somebody wants to be healthy. And when people do healthy behaviors, when they start taking care of themselves, actually that's when the cost of health care starts coming down. It's not something the government does. It's not from the top down. It's from the bottom up.
Do you, when you guys are in chambers, I mean, what do you talk about? Do you talk about freedom? Do you talk about what the state can do to thwart some of the activities of the political left and some of the communist socialists and their schemes in Washington?
Well, we as a body, and certainly the Republican caucus of the Florida House has been one of the most conservative legislative bodies in the United States. We get it, and we have actually removed 160 pieces of statutes that have been out there for years. We have repealed them, and we have actually the set of state statute books are actually smaller than what they were when I first arrived in Tallahassee 6-7 years ago. Now, one of the challenges we have actually in St. Johns County, where I'm out walking today, our whole delegation has just essentially put in their resignations. We lost John Thrasher to Florida State University, and myself and the other representative, we've resigned to run for his seat. And we're going to need to have some leadership and experience to carry this area and the concerns that we have for this northeast Florida corridor to Tallahassee, to make sure that our issues are being handled, because the growth in this area is different than anywhere else in the state. And again, keeping up with the infrastructure has been a challenge, and particularly in our schools, roads, and things like that. We've been very fortunate, or I've been very fortunate, to get special items in the budget these last number of years, but you also have to have that same piece of budget in the Senate side. So we're going to have to make sure that we have leadership to carry us through this again.
Doc, in the last couple minutes of the show, how does a citizen get in touch with your campaign, and what is your website?
Oh, I appreciate you asking that. The website is votedocrenewart.com, and there they can contribute, they can volunteer, they can learn more information about my policy issues and more about my background. Currently, I'm one of just 3 physicians that are in the state legislature, but there has not been a practicing physician in the Senate for the last 13 years. And if you can imagine all those health care and patient issues that have been coming across my desk on the House side, really we're relying on non-medical specialists to make those decisions on the Senate side.
Yes, and very important to have, I think it was 5 doctors that were involved in the founding of this country. 5 doctors signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
And 3 of them were military doctors, too.
Fantastic. Well, Doc, thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Forrest. I appreciate it.
AM 600, FM 100.3, The Resistance. You've been listening to Forrest Wilson. We'll see you next week.